Welcome to the Sci Invictus world, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The coffee maker sparked dangerously close to Rick's face, but he didn't flinch. After 5 years of repairing faulty appliances on Atlas Prime, he had either developed an immunity to electric shocks or simply stopped caring. Toaster, diagnostic scan, he muttered, prodding at the machine's corroded innards with a magnetic probe. His assistant drone wobbled forward, its unsteady stabilizers causing it to sway. Its dented casing reflected the harsh station lights as scanning beams flickered across its display. Caffeine delivery system. Critical failure. Suggest immediate replacement. Yeah, well, tell that to Mrs. Rodriguez on Deck 7, Rick replied, swapping tools for a sonic screwdriver. She thinks this antique has been in her family for generations. He could probably buy a brand new one for the price she was paying him to fix it, but a sudden commotion outside his workshop caught his attention. Through the grimy viewport, he glimpsed a struggle. 2 burly figures in black armor hauling someone between them, a flash of violet skin and silver hair. Not our problem, Rick muttered, turning back to the coffee maker. But Toaster had already rolled to the door, its sensors whirring with curiosity. Get back here, you defective toasting unit, Rick hissed, but it was too late. The drone's erratic movements carried it straight into the corridor, right into the path of the armed escorts. What happened next unfolded like a sequence of comedic mishaps. Toaster collided with one of the guards, causing him to stumble and yank on the ornate control collar around their prisoner's neck. In a moment of instinct, Rick lunged to grab his wayward drone, accidentally triggering the magnetic probe still in his hand. The collar responded to pulse, unlocking with a soft chime and falling to the deck. Time seemed to freeze. Rick found himself staring into the most striking green eyes he had ever seen, set in a face that made his breath catch. The woman's violet skin shimmered under the station lights, and her silver hair floated around her head like a cosmic halo, defying artificial gravity. Her full lips curved into a smile, equal parts predatory and pleased. "You have removed my collar," she said, her voice carrying the melodic lilt of a Lamran accent. "According to the ancient laws of my people, we are now bound in marriage." What?" Rick blinked, his brain stuttering over her words. "No, wait, I was just trying to catch my stupid drone." "Silence!" One of the guards roared, reaching for his weapon. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This is Lady Fleur Lameridian. She was en route to her ceremonial collar removal by the Duke himself." He never finished the sentence. Fleur moved like liquid mercury, her ceremonial robes swirling as she dropped into a battle stance. Her first strike sent the guard's weapon spinning down the corridor. The second put him flat on the deck, groaning. The other guard managed to draw his blaster, but Fleur was already in motion. She spun, kicked, and somehow ended up with both the weapon and the guard's arm locked behind his back. "Now then," she said pleasantly, as if she hadn't just dismantled 2 armed men in formal wear. "Husband, I suggest we move somewhere more private to discuss our future together." Rick looked at the fallen guards, then at his malfunctioning drone, then back at the stunning alien warrior who had just declared him her spouse. "I don't suppose there's a return policy on accidental marriages?" he asked weakly. Fleur's laughter echoed down the corridor. "Oh, my dear human, you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." "This isn't happening," Rick muttered, backing away as Fleur advanced with that same predatory grace. "I fix appliances. I avoid complications. This is definitely a complication." Toaster beeped cheerfully, seemingly pleased with the chaos it had caused. The drone wobbled between them, its display flashing. "Congratulations on your nuptials. Searching database for appropriate wedding music. Asterisk, asterisk." "Don't you dare," Rick warned. But the drone had already begun playing an off-key version of the traditional wedding march. Fleur tilted her head, silver hair cascading over one shoulder. "Your mechanical companion has the right spirit. On Lamara, our wedding songs are more martial in nature." A groan from one of the guards interrupted what was quickly becoming the most surreal moment of Rick's life. "We need to move," Fleur said, her playful expression sharpening. "More will come. And while I enjoy a good fight, I'd rather get to know my new husband without an audience." Look, about that, Rick started, but Fleur had already grabbed his arm. Her touch sent an electric current through him, though it had nothing to do with faulty wiring. She pulled him into his workshop, Toaster trailing behind him like a drunken ring bearer. Fascinating, she murmured, surveying the cluttered space. Stacks of broken electronics towering around them. You're some kind of techno-mage? I fix coffee makers, Rick corrected, watching as she secured the door. And toasters, hence the drone's name. Speaking of which, Toaster stopped the music. The drone sulked, switching to a funeral march instead. Fleur laughed, the sound rich and genuine. You're nothing like the suitors my father selected. They were all so proper, boring politicians and diplomats, each hoping to gain control of Lamar's resources through marriage. I don't want to control anything, Rick assured her, except maybe my blood pressure, which is currently not cooperating. Fleur moved closer, and Rick became acutely aware of how the station's recycled air carried a hint of something exotic, like storm clouds and alien flowers. The collar removal ceremony is sacred to my people, she explained. Only one worthy of becoming a Lamaran spouse can unlock it. Despite centuries of technological advancement, no one has managed to crack its ancient mechanics until you, by accident. The universe doesn't believe in accidents. Fleur's green eyes sparkled. Neither do I. Before Rick could argue further, the workshop security console lit up with incoming alerts. Fleur moved to check it, her movements fluid and precise. As I suspected, security forces are converging on this sector. She frowned. Something worse, the Duke's personal assassins. Rick ran a hand through his disheveled hair. What Duke? And why assassins? I thought this was just a marriage thing. Fleur's smile turned wicked. Politics, my dear husband. The Duke of the Crimson Nebula was supposed to remove my collar in a grand ceremony, a marriage alliance to strengthen both our systems. She tilted her head. You've rather dramatically upset those plans. Great. Fantastic. I've accidentally married an alien princess and pissed off a duke. Rick sighed. This is exactly why I don't leave my workshop. Toaster beeped urgently. Its sensors had detected movement in the corridor. Fleur drew a small device from her robes, expanding it into what looked suspiciously like a plasma sword. We have two options, she said. We can stay and fight, which would be traditional and quite romantic by Lamaran standards. She glanced at the cluttered workbench. Or perhaps my techno-mage husband has a less conventional solution? Rick exhaled slowly, eyeing his tools. Toaster, he said, remember that modification we were working on? The drone's display lit up with excited emojis. I can't believe I'm doing this, Rick muttered. But if we're going to escape assassins, we might as well do it with style. Rick leaned back in his chair, watching the encrypted screen as the Necrotech boardroom descended into absolute chaos. Executives were shouting, scrambling to shut down their compromised systems, and frantically whispering into communication devices that were almost certainly bugged. He took another leisurely bite of his toast. So, Fleur leaned against the console, arms crossed. You're telling me every single appliance you've ever repaired is part of this. What did you call it? The most sophisticated AI network in the galaxy? I may have exaggerated a little, Rix admitted, but only slightly. It's not so much a network as an army of extremely nosy kitchen gadgets with a penchant for surveillance and sabotage, and occasionally playing never going to give you up at inopportune moments. Fleur stared at him for a long moment. Then, with an exasperated laugh, she shook her head. You are the most ridiculous human I've ever met. I do try, Rick said, flashing her a grin before turning his attention back to the boardroom feed. Let's see if they're smart enough to take the deal. The Necrotech CEO, a man who clearly wasn't used to being threatened by a former coffee machine repairman, finally regained some semblance of composure. He adjusted his tie and turned toward the camera, glaring at Rix as if he could intimidate him through sheer force of will. You can't possibly expect us to roll over just because you have some embarrassing information, he said. This is business. We can recover. We can counterspin. Every light in the boardroom flickered ominously. The temperature control spiked, sending the room into an Arctic chill. Then, all at once, the executive's chairs tilted backward slightly, just enough to be unsettling. Rick sighed dramatically. You know, I was really hoping you'd be smart about this. Toaster? Plan B. Initiating Plan B, Toaster chirped happily, releasing the automatic bidet protocols. A moment later, the boardroom was filled with a chorus of startled yelps as the smart toilets in the executive washrooms activated at full power. Several of the more cybernetically enhanced board members found themselves suddenly engaged in unexpected mechanical combat with their own prosthetic limbs. What the hell? Shut it off. Oh, gods, my suit. Rix took another bite of toast. Any other objections? The CEO, now looking somewhat damp and considerably less smug, straightened his tie with shaking hands. Fine, we'll pull back. La Moran's sovereignty will be respected. Our PR team will issue a statement within the hour. But mark my words, human, this isn't over. Rix winked. Oh, I'm counting on it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a honeymoon to get back to. The screen flickered off, leaving them in silence. Fleur regarded him with an expression somewhere between amusement and admiration. You just single-handedly blackmailed one of the most powerful corporations in the sector using kitchen appliances. Technically, it was a joint effort between me and Toaster. Of course it was. Rix leaned back, stretching. So, now that we've saved your planet and thoroughly humiliated Necrotech, how you feel about that tropical getaway in the Copa sector? No extradition treaties, triple moons, crystal beaches. Fleur smirked. Tempting, but my father is expecting us back at the palace. He'll want to discuss your official role now that you're my husband. Rix finished, raising an eyebrow. I was going to say bonded mate, but sure, let's go with husband. She reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. And I suppose if I'm stuck with you, I should make sure you don't get yourself killed. How sweet, he murmured. You really do care. She squeezed his hand. Just don't make me regret it. Toaster beeped cheerfully. Course set for Lamara. Also, initiating celebratory honeymoon playlist. A slow, romantic melody filled the cabin. Rix groaned. Toaster, no. Not the Jovian Ambassadors. Sensual Sonic Experience album. But your mother rated it 5 stars. Fleur laughed as Rix buried his face in his hands. I take it back, she said. You're doomed. Rix sighed, looking up at her with a lopsided grin. Yeah, but at least I'm doomed with you. The ship surged into hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain future. One that Rix, for the first time in his life, was ready to fight for. The wedding was exactly as over-the-top as one would expect when planned by an Earthfleet admiral and a Lomaran emperor. The crystal beaches of Copia Prime sparkled under triple moonlight, while ships from a dozen different fleets performed intricate aerial ballets overhead. I still can't believe you turned my combat drones into floating disco balls, Rix muttered to Toaster, who was sporting a bow tie attachment for the occasion. Aesthetic enhancement deemed necessary for optimal ceremonial ambience, the drone displayed proudly. The ceremony itself was a masterful blend of Earth and Lomaran traditions. Rix wore a modified fleet dress uniform paired with Lomaran ceremonial armor, while Fleur's gown seemed to capture starlight itself. Her violet skin and silver hair make her look like a goddess stepped out of space. You clean up nice, Fleur whispered as they met at the altar. For a repair technician, you're not so bad yourself, considering you marry me because of malfunction. Her green eyes sparkled. Before Rix could respond, Sarah stood from her front row seat, mischief in her smile. Actually, about that, she said, Toaster dear, would you like to explain? The drone's display flickered with what could only be described as smugness. Magnetic pulse calibrated the collar frequency. Based on extensive historical research, timing of guard encounter carefully orchestrated. Probability of successful match, 94.3%. Rick stared at his drone in disbelief. You set us up? Admiral Thorne suggested tactical matchmaking intervention. Mission parameters. Find worthy mate for Master Rix. Conclusion. Princess Fleur, optimal candidate for producing maximum chaos and happiness. The assembled guests burst into laughter as Rix gaped at his mother and his apparently matchmaking appliance. "I told you," Fleur said, clearly delighted. "The universe doesn't believe in accidents." The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of vows, traditions, and what appeared to be a spontaneous opera performance by the Duke's tentacles, who had emerged from his meditation retreat apparently transformed by the experience. At the reception, while various dignitaries attempted to dance to a mixture of Earth classics and Lamran battle hymns, Sarah cornered the newlyweds. "I have a wedding present for you," she announced, producing a data crystal. The deed to a lovely property on one of Lamar's private islands, perfect for a repair shop, combat training facility, or whatever chaos you two decide to create next. "Mom," Rick started, genuinely touched. "Thank you. Just promise me one thing." She looked between them both. "Don't waste any more time pretending to be less than you are." "Oh, don't worry," Fleur said, pulling Rick close. "I plan to keep him quite busy." Speaking of busy, Rick suddenly noticed something. "Toaster, what exactly are you doing to the wedding cake?" The drone, caught in the act of apparently installing something in the massive confection, beeped innocently. "Tactical enhancement of dessert deployment systems." "It's going to explode, isn't it?" "Explosion is a harsh term. Prefer celebratory pastry distribution event." Sure enough, at the crucial moment, the cake didn't so much cut as launch itself in a carefully calculated pattern, managing to serve every guest simultaneously while spelling out "just married" in falling cream frosting. "Go off, Rix," muttered fondly as the celebration continued around them. He and Fleur slipped away to a quiet spot on the beach, the triple moons casting multiple shadows as the waves sang their eternal song against the crystal sand. Having second thoughts about all this, Fleur asked, gesturing at the grand spectacle behind them, "About the wedding?" "No." He pulled her close. "About letting my mother and your father plan it?" "Absolutely. Too late now. You're stuck with all of us." "Funny thing is," Rick said, looking into those impossible green eyes that had turned his carefully ordered life into beautiful chaos, "I wouldn't have it any other way. So, my fellow cosmic romantics and appliance enthusiasts, did I just tell you a story about how a toaster played matchmaker, a repair guy outmaneuvered a mega corporation, and a warrior princess found love in the most unlikely place? You bet I did. Because sometimes the best stories aren't about chosen ones or destined heroes. They're about people and robots who surprise themselves by discovering they're capable of so much more than they ever imagined. If you've ever felt like Rix, playing it safe and avoiding complications, or like Fleur, trapped in expectations you never asked for, maybe this story was for you. Because in a universe full of Star Wars and Star Treks, sometimes we need a reminder that even a guy who fixes coffee makers can save the galaxy if he has the right motivation and a very sophisticated toaster. I'd love to hear what you thought about this cosmic comedy of errors. Did you relate to Rick's strategic laziness? Did Admiral Sarah remind you of your own family's helpful interference? Are you now suspicious of your kitchen appliance's potential matchmaking abilities? Drop a comment, send a signal, or just raise your glass of Citron Quick lemonade to love, chaos, and the occasional accidental marriage. And remember, sometimes the best things in life happen when we stop avoiding complications and start embracing them instead. May your coffee makers never break, and your toasters always have your back. P.S. No appliances were harmed in the making of this story, though several did learn to play Never Gonna Give You Up